They say home is where you feel safest, surrounded by people who love you unconditionally. But for the Morgan family, home became the place they would take their final breath, at the hands of someone they loved the most. The Morgans were, by all appearances, the model suburban family. Harold and Diane Morgan had been married for over 35 years. They lived in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in Indiana, where they raised 2 children. James Jr., their firstborn son, and Emily, their younger daughter. Harold was a retired school principal. Diane volunteered at the local food bank and still baked cookies for the church. They were the kind of people everyone trusted. Their children were raised with firm values, given good educations, and most importantly, endless love. But love has its limits, and some people only see kindness as weakness. James Jr., now 33, had always been the more difficult child. Smart but troubled. He dropped out of college after just 2 years. He had a history of failed businesses, expensive tastes, and mounting debt. His parents often helped, paying off credit cards, co-signing loans, even handing over cash when he claimed his rent was overdue. Emily once asked her parents why they kept helping him. "Because he's our son," Diane had replied. "Family comes first." But even Emily didn't know how deep James's problems went. Behind the scenes, James had developed a dangerous gambling habit. He was thousands of dollars in debt to some very dangerous people. And time was running out. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Emily made a routine call to check in on her parents. No one picked up. She tried again an hour later. Still nothing. By evening, she drove to their home. The door was unlocked. What she found inside was every daughter's worst nightmare. Harold and Diane were lying side by side in the living room, both stabbed multiple times. Blood soaked the carpet. The furniture was overturned. Family heirlooms were missing, jewelry, silverware, even Harold's old coin collection. The police were called immediately. At first glance, it looked like a burglary gone horribly wrong. But the deeper investigators dug, the more things didn't make sense. There were no signs of forced entry. The door hadn't been broken, the windows were untouched. Whoever did this had either been let in, or already had access. Detectives began to reconstruct the timeline. Neighbors had seen a familiar car parked outside the Morgan home around noon that day, James Jr.'s gray Toyota. He told investigators he had stopped by briefly to borrow some money, but left soon after. But security camera footage from a nearby neighbor's home told a different story. His car had been parked outside for nearly 4 hours. When police obtained a warrant to search James's apartment, the real horror began to unfold. In his laundry hamper were blood-stained clothes. In his drawer were his mother's wedding ring and his father's engraved watch. Even more damning, a bloody knife, cleaned but still bearing traces of DNA, was found in a shoebox under his bed. Under interrogation, James insisted he was innocent. He claimed he had entered the house, found his parents already dead, and panicked. He said he took the valuables to keep them safe, and ran before calling for help because he was afraid he'd be blamed. But detectives weren't buying it. His financial records revealed thousands in gambling debt, 2 maxed-out credit cards, and several online betting transfers just days before the murders. Even more disturbing, one of the text messages recovered from his phone read, "They said if I don't pay by next week, they're coming for me first." It became clear. James saw his parents not as people but as a solution. He didn't just steal from them. He planned their deaths, coldly, methodically, and with horrifying ease. The trial was brutal. Emily testified against her brother, tears streaming down her face as she recalled the day she found their parents' bodies. The prosecution painted James as a manipulative, desperate man who killed the very people who had spent their lives saving him. The defense argued mental instability, emotional breakdown, and pressure from dangerous debts. But the evidence was overwhelming. After 3 days of deliberation, James Morgan Jr. was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Emily never visited her brother again. In interviews, she admitted feeling guilt, not for what happened but for not seeing it sooner. "I always thought he'd ruin his own life," she said. "I never imagined he'd take theirs." The Morgan house was sold a year later. But the horror of what happened there remains in neighborhood whispers and family grief. Because in this story, the killer didn't break in from outside. He was already home. He was family. And no one ever saw it coming.